Hi everybody. Today I'm going to explain how to make a god level. I'm finally going to explain how, and I hope that all of you guys can learn from this because unfortunately there are many god mode levels that are very poorly charted, if not ridiculously difficult, that are unironically done in FNF. So first off, I'm going to introduce you to this whole concept with the original God mode level, which is Final Destination God. So, pretty straightforward. What the creator did is that they put one death note or two death note per section. So, this obviously is because this is the beginning of the level. You don't want to exaggerate too much on the mechanics. You want to keep it consistent throughout the level. Obviously, the more you're into the level, the more it's going to be difficult. So as we can see with the placement, he puts one or two per section. And something that I want to point out with death notes, right now we're going to talk about death notes, is that you're never going to see in the original Final Destination various placement where the death note is below or above the normal note, right? Like this or like this. Now the reason why is because if you put a note, a death note below or above a normal note, the timing of you hitting that specific note is going to be super precise. And it's something that not a lot of players master, right? And it's something that can be quite inconsistent sometimes. So this is why you see a lot of death note placement that are either next to the note, to the normal note, or placed somewhere else, right? Usually it's next to the normal note, as we can see here. Now, something else that I need to point out is that if there is very few notes, for example, if you see one simple note in one single section, you're gonna put more death notes. Okay, it's depending on how many notes there is in that specific part. It's not really showcased in the beginning of Final Destination God, but eventually you're going to notice that Sir Perez, aka the creator of this level, would usually put a decent amount of death notes in empty spots. So usually here there would be death notes, very few in the empty spots, right? So my advice to putting death notes to empty spots is to not make sure that the player ghost taps. No, like if the player sees this, first off, it's very distracting. Second, it doesn't look very nice once you play the level. And third, it's too extra. There's too many death notes for no reason. Look, this amount of death notes is enough to tell the player to not ghost tap on the left side of hitting the notes, right? It's pretty obvious. A player is not going to ghost tap by accident in the part where there's obviously some death notes. I do not think that every player who play God levels is going to be stupid enough to try to ghost tap in a section like this. Alright, now that's been said, one last message or clarification on death notes is that yes, in certain parts, just in certain parts, you're going to see some notes above or below a normal note. But it's very rare. It's not something you're going to see very often. Most death note placements are going to be next to the note or placed somewhere else close to the note, but not above or below. Because that would be a totally new mechanic in some way of hitting the notes in a precise timing. So yeah. All right. Now for the duets, which we're going to see right now. Your placement of the def notes in your first duet needs to be very, very diminished compared to normal sections. Because obviously, this is a space of 4 notes, I think. Yeah, 4 notes, where there are a big amount of notes. So you're going to have to place your def notes in very empty spaces and also a very few of them. Now, warning notes. Warning notes are very different from def notes, obviously, but the amount of warning notes that you will place in sections in the beginning of a level or even later is going to be a little bit bigger than the amount of def notes that you're going to put. Now, the reason is pretty obvious. It's because warning notes, what you're supposed to do with them is hit them. You're supposed to hit them like if they were normal notes. The only difference is that if you miss them, you die. But this is really a mechanic that that is much more easier to execute, because this has been the original concept of Friday Night Funkin' ever since the beginning, where it's hitting notes and trying not to miss too much. So this is really a much more simpler mechanics than def notes, because here you don't need to avoid them, you need to hit them, and they are placed like normal notes. Now, as we can see, there's about 2 or multiple placements of the warning notes in certain sections, but usually the way it works is that it's the contrary of def notes, where if there's too many notes, if there's too many normal notes, you are going to place more warning notes in that section. And obviously, if there are less notes, then you're going to place less warning notes in the sections where there are not a lot of notes. So, same thing for the duet as we're going to see here. You're going to have to diminish the amount of warning notes you're going to put, because obviously you're going to have to work with 2 mechanics at the same time once you actually play the level, both trying to hit the notes and on the left side trying to avoid some notes. So the amount of notes mechanics that you're going to place has to be very little in both sides, because obviously it's multitasking and it's something that requires much more skills than a normal section. Now, I want to point out that even if the amount of def notes or warning notes seem to be very little in the charting editor, it does not mean that once you play the level, it's going to be the same thing. You do not have to judge what you see in the charting editor as what you're going to see in the gameplay. It's very different. It's very different, and this is why playtesting is extremely important, which not a lot of players do, unfortunately. So one key, the most important thing to do once you create a god level is to know how to playtest. You need to playtest every section that you create to make sure that it's balanced and fair, and at the same time very difficult, of course. And a little extra thing that you could do is that after a duet, you could just remove the mechanics for about 6 or 8 sections, depending on how the music is made. So after that, same concept with the mechanics, same thing as the beginning. Sometimes there's going to be parts where the amount of mechanics or warning notes is going to be really compressed into one section, but that is depending on how the music is going. Now, for this part, This is the reason why there's a big amount of def notes and that they're usually above, as we can see, they're above their normal notes, is because the pattern of this part is very obvious and very easy to execute. It's a very obvious pattern, so obviously this is something very readable. So this is why the amount of def notes is increased in this. It's because this part is very easy to execute, no matter if you're bad or good with 9 keys. Once all of this is done, you're going to increase the amount of def notes and warning notes in your sections. As we can see, there's a big amount now. In the beginning, there were 2 warning notes or 3 warning notes per sections, and as we can see here, it doubled and even tripled. So yeah, doubled. So this is what you should do. Just double the amount or just increase the amount, because obviously depending on how you charted the beginning of your level, sometimes doubling the amount of def notes or warning notes could be a bit chaotic. Also, make sure the placement is consistent where it's possible and not unfair. Now, as we can see, as I mentioned in the beginning, Sir Perez, aka the creator of this level, would put def notes on empty spots. And if we want to look at this from another perspective, if we removed the def notes on the empty spots, it would just be like the beginning. So the only thing that makes these parts harder is the fact that there are def notes and empty spots, and also a bit of an augmentation in the amount of def notes, which is doubled. In the beginning there were 2 per sections. Here we can see there are 4 or 3 per sections. And also there's a bit, and I mean a little bit, of def note placement that are above or below a normal note. But it's only a small amount, where if you don't hit them, it's fine, you're still gonna live. So to make a good second half, you just make sure that you put a consistent amount of def notes and warning notes. And also for the def notes, you put a little bit of def notes on empty spots. And also you make sure that it's not too hard and that you don't require precise timings. As we can see here, there's a bigger amount, but the only difference is that there are more def notes on empty spots. As we can see here, this is a very easy part to hit, but because there are a lot of def notes on empty spots where you don't necessarily need to hit, this is why you can underestimate for this part to be hard. But yeah, the def notes are usually there to distract you and to make you miss. So same thing goes along. And now for the interesting part. Okay, sometimes you can make cute or very funny def note placement where it looks like a specific pattern if you want. So now for the second part, look, you're going to put the def notes and the warning notes together, right? You have to follow the same rules as the beginning, but now you put them together and for both sides. So as we can see here, the def notes are placed next to the normal notes, and there's a small amount. There's obviously a smaller amount than the second half sections. So what you do pretty much, and this is my advice, the amount of def notes and warning notes that you would put in the beginning, put it in the second duet, but this time put them together. Make sure that it's a layout, you know, mix it up. but at the same time make sure that the quantity of these mechanics are very, very little. As we can see here, yes, there is a def note below a warning note, but again, the layout is the placement of these notes have a very obvious pattern, which is just stairs. So this is why they want to make sure that you hit this part in a precise timing. So as we can see, there's not too many def notes and not too many warning notes. And if there is a section where there's a lot of def notes, there's very few amount of warning notes. All right. Now this is the second part of the duet. Same thing here. As you can see, there's less def notes, but there's an equal amount of def notes and warning notes in here. And there's very few def notes, but there are more warning notes. So it goes along for the whole level. Yeah. So yeah, as we can see, there's the placement of the def notes are very easy to read, but to compensate that, the creator put more warning notes, and that's exactly what you should do in your level. So for the last part, the outro, what you do is just put warning notes and def notes together. That's it. Does it need to be harder than the duets? No. And also make sure that in your outro there is more timing difficulty, meaning that, as you can see, there's a lot of def notes below a normal note, which means it requires you to do precise timings. But the reason why this is the case is because this part is very easy to understand the rhythm. It's easy to understand the rhythm of this part. Wait. It's quite easy to understand the pattern of the music. So this is why there's a lot of timing required. Anyways, just to be cheeky, you know, add a last note. Add a last note that is very, very hard to time and to hit. As we can see, the timing has to be extremely precise here for you to hit that note. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening. And if you have any comments about this quote-unquote tutorial, go ahead and tell me. Anyways, goodbye.